Welcome back to Hiking with Kathleen. So I was just making my way out to the woods to go for a nice hike, and I started thinking of all the reasons I enjoy doing this. So part of it is I just enjoy being in nature. Not necessarily because I'm hiking or paddling or camping, but those are the types of activities that bring me in contact with nature. So to give you an idea of the thought process I'm going through, when you're out in nature and you focus on the nature around you, so wildlife, the plants, anything like that, it allows you to live in the moment. And living in the moment helps you to be able to sort of forget whatever might be troubling you. It gives you a chance to take a break from the stress in your life. Those stresses are still going to be there for you when you're finished your hike or paddle or camping experience, but it allows you to take a break, and that's a really healthy thing to do. So while out here today, as I was making my way to this spot, thoughts of my mom were flowing through my mind. And so she passed away a little over a year and a quarter ago. And she and I were very close. In fact, I talked about the healing effects of nature in an earlier video that was recorded in the spring. But in this particular case, I was just thinking of all the wonderful memories I enjoyed making with her. And a lot of times those required just putting things that were on the list to do on hold, including work. So I took great pleasure in going home to see both my parents. And, you know, they were together right to the end. What would it be? 1952 to 2020. That's how long they were together, almost 68 years. And so I used to go home, and my mom and I would take off. They lived in Windsor. We'd go to the casino. Why? Well, we wanted to make our $20 deposit on some of the slot machines. But then we'd go and buy coffee at Starbucks in a casino, and we'd sit down and we'd people watch. And we really, really enjoyed that. We went on a few vacations together over the years, and it was just a real gift to be able to spend that time with her. I also enjoyed going to Windsor or having her come by Greyhound bus or via rail and picking her up and having her home with me for a week. And, you know, it was nice because then, you know, she and my dad could do their own thing. And it would give me a lot of time with my mom. And it's not that we had just one-on-one time, because typically I was working still, having only retired in September of 2020. But what would end up happening is, you know, we would have dinner together. We would have conversations together. We'd have time together where time stood still. And that was such a beautiful thing. It was such a gift to give each other. So I guess the message that I'm hoping to leave you with is how nature can be such a healing force, because it sort of re-energizes you, but it allows you to think about the things that really matter. And, you know, I retired at age 56. And I'll tell you, my life improved, my quality of life improved, I don't know, tenfold, because I wasn't always having to think of the checklist of things that had to get done or the stresses that would regularly come up. I was a financial planner for the last 22 years, and you know, there were a lot of things that were on the go. The pandemic was having a devastating effect on the markets. And so anyway, it was a time in my life that I planned with Shannon to retire in the summer of 2020. I just didn't think it was going to be possible because of the turbulence that came along, because we didn't know there was going to be a pandemic. But quality of life since increased amazingly. And I'm still in contact with folks from work or folks that are still working, and sometimes money can be a real driver to stay in the workforce or accept the stress that goes along with it, maybe working multiple jobs. But what it can do by having and allowing all those stresses to remain and those commitments on your time is it prevents you from just standing here and listening to the sound and fully immersing yourself in the moment. And I'll tell you, that's that's a natural medicine right there. So it helps you to reevaluate what's really important to you. Shannon and I have spent a lot of time this summer, 2021, camping. And if you haven't seen those videos, you might be interested in seeing some of our adventures as we traveled around Ontario, Canada. But it was also a really great way of being able to spend time together. Because we know back at home there's chores, there's things that we each like to do. We each have our own passions. And but when we're camping, we're doing those passions together. We have shared passions. So that's a really neat thing too. It's a gift that you're giving to each other by giving them your undivided attention. And whether it's a spouse or whether it's your children or parents, time is a wonderful gift to give to somebody. We had my dad over for just a visit in the afternoon, about 2 or 3 afternoons ago, just for about 3 hours. And it was actually one of our most memorable visits. And it's just because of the kind of conversation we were able to have. And just, it's not that I was running around and preparing a meal, and you know, we were just sitting under the tree in our backyard, enjoying the moment. So anyway, the gift of time. There's nothing that can replace it, especially if that time can be spent in nature. Thanks for listening. Just reflecting back on that conversation I mentioned I was having with my father a few days ago. So he'll be turning 94 soon, or 95 soon. And he was talking to me about his parents, my grandparents, whom I knew and loved. My grandfather died when I was about 15, and my grandma died when I was about 22. So, you know, when you're kids, you don't really have those moments to connect one-on-one with your grandparents as you would later in life when you recognize the importance of it. So what was really neat is they gave my dad a chance to talk about his parents and the fact that he was stating his mother was way ahead of her time. And there were things he mentioned about her thought process that made me say, oh my God, you married your mother. Because my mom was not one that you could pull the wool over her eyes. She was able to see through things quite easily, but she was also very wise, very kind. And it made me realize that he had done the same thing I did. I married my mother. I married Shannon, and I knew already that I felt that I had married someone that had some similarities to the characteristics about my mom that I loved. Her creativity, her kindness, her insightfulness. Well, now I realize my dad did the same thing, and that he was more like his dad. Because I have to say, I probably didn't know his dad as well, because, you know, I was 15 when he passed away. So anyway, it's interesting how it all comes full circle. But we wouldn't have had the time to uncover some of those things if we had planned an outing with him. We'd had him to our backyard cabin. We played YouTube music, I don't know, a few days before. Well, that's really a lot of fun and memorable. But those are not the things that help you to get to know one another a little better. But the time where it's uninterrupted conversation, that was really meaningful to me. In fact, he called 2, or maybe it was 3 times, to say how much he enjoyed himself based on the conversation we had just 2 or 3 days ago. So that's good. That made me feel good that it was also something very meaningful for him to be able to talk about what mattered. So, the gift of time. And that was spent sort of in nature. It was spent in our backyard under the tree. Something he doesn't get to do very often because he lives in a retirement home. In fact, his home was adjoining my mom's nursing home. So when she was, you know, living beside him, he would go see her several times a day. And that warmed his heart that he could do that. But now he doesn't have that, so it's nice when he can reflect on his wonderful memories of my mom, but also other people in his family that were very important to him. With regards to my mom, what I would do is I would pick her up from her long-term care home. I saw her at least 7 times a week and loved it, wanted to be her primary caregiver, wanted to be able to spend the time making sure she was okay and not bored. There was a time for about 2 years that my dad was living in a different home because the retirement home adjoining hers wasn't yet built. So he had to take a bus to see her, which he would do 5 or 6 days a week. But what I would do with my mom, Shannon and I would take her out to a local farmer's market where there were artisans, musicians. Oh my God, she loved it. She loved it, and she looked forward to that when we would do that on Saturdays with her. But there are other things I did with her. I'd just pick her up, and we'd head down to a local park, sit on a park bench, and just sit. And she loved listening to the sound of the Thames River, the sound of the leaves rustling in the wind. Loved hearing the birds. And I would let her lead. I wouldn't talk. We would just sit there in silence, just enjoying each other's company and enjoying the sounds of nature around us. In fact, there was one time I remember saying to her, because we'd been sitting silent for so long, I said, "Mom, are you ready to go?" She said, "Okay, if that's what you want." I said, "Well, do you want to stay?" She said, "If that would be okay, I would prefer that." Oh my God, so of course we stayed. Something she didn't get to do in a nursing home. So again, is the gift of time. And that is what part of the healing that can be offered by spending some of that time out in nature. So I'm interested in hearing about you and your retirement. For those of you who are viewing this that are in retirement now, what did you envision yourself doing? What was your passion? For me, retirement wasn't my passion to get to that goal. It was what it would enable me to do because I'd have the gift of time. So I knew that I would return to being in the outdoors as much as possible. And the great thing about that is it didn't depend on having money, just time and availability. So what about you? What does your retirement look like? And is it what you thought it would be? Yeah, I know we're going through a pandemic. For me, I suppose in some ways that was icing on the cake because it forced us to look more closely at exploring Canada, and specifically our province, Ontario. And that's what we did with camping. Yeah, we'd like to travel around the world, but that'll come. That'll come when people continue to protect our communities against the virus with higher vaccination rates and all. That'll come in time. But for right now, what's nice is that I think a lot of us are becoming more familiar with our own backyard. So anyway, tell me about your retirement. What were your passions going in? And is that something you felt you were able to realize? For me, it's 100% yes. So I'd love to hear from you. So I wanted to provide you with an update today. A couple of days ago, I went to the optometrist to do an eye checkup that they had requested because it had been 2 years since my last one. And to my optometrist's surprise, she found that my vision has actually improved. I hadn't seen her for 2 years, and I now no longer require prescription glasses for using them for driving or watching TV across the room. I still need reading glasses, but that's because the elasticity in our eyes for reading or for seeing things up close diminishes with increasing age. But in this case here, I no longer require prescription glasses. So she has the reading from 2 years ago and from what they were just 2 days ago. And she was really surprised by that. And the big thing that has changed since my appointment with her 2 years ago is I retired. So I retired about a year ago, and so my working life was a very stressful life. And of course, with my mom in long-term care, whom I miss dearly, there was also a lot of stress with being her primary caregiver. So it just so happens that when you immerse yourself in nature and when you reduce the stress that you have in your life, it's amazing the kinds of things or improvements that can happen to your overall health. So for what it's worth, give that some thought. A reduction in stress can be a really remarkably good thing for you.